Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We hope everyone is keeping safe and well. And for the next hour, we'll be talking about some of the challenges around medical device design control and give you an insight into some of the tools and best practices the leaders in your space are applying in this area. Ensuring quality is at the very centre of every product-related decision is critical in this ever more complex regulatory landscape that you guys do your business in. You'll see how we can help you unify engineering, quality, and regulatory teams with a shared view of the product innovation lifecycle. Also, we'll show you how we can completely de-risk the process of building complete and accurate controlled design history files and device master records as a natural extension of the product development process rather than as an afterthought. But before we go any further, let's have a look at who's on today's call from our end. So I'm Lee Edmonds and I run the PLM segment here at Concurrent, focusing primarily on the medical device space. I'm joined today by our Managing Director, Owen Kirby, who has a ton of experience working with our existing customers in the medical device industry, predominantly joining the dots between the business problem and the technical requirements. Also on the call, we have one of our senior solution architects, Adrian Lowe, who works with our clients in this space to design and deliver the systems that we implement. We're going to start with a very short video, which hopefully will set the scene for some of today's discussions.
PTC strongly believes that there's a right way to do medical engineering, and that's through a product-centered approach.
Having a product-centric approach to quality or a data-centric approach to quality really enables manufacturers to leverage the data that they've been collecting across the entire product lifecycle.
Engineers want to move forward with new ideas, but they're held back by the time it takes to validate, verify, and document those ideas in the form of product updates. This is what we call the medical innovation gap.
What's happening is FDA is saying to the device makers, if you can show us that you're committed to quality, if you can provide us with data, then we will work with you in order to expedite products to market, as well as remove you from FDA inspections. In order to accelerate innovation, medical device manufacturers need to unify all the functional areas within the organization, from R&D and engineering to quality, manufacturing, and regulatory. They need to be working together in a shared product-centric view across the product innovation lifecycle.
What's the value of selling the latest technology into the marketplace? What's the value of first mover advantage? In a nutshell, that's the advantage of windshield quality management.
So we'll start today by reviewing some of the market dynamics and business drivers that are influencing the evolution of med device businesses today. We'll then introduce the concept of the digital thread, and we'll see how if we link all the silos, people, processes, and departments into a unified system, great improvements can be made. We'll then take a deeper dive into the regulatory landscape before looking at some of the technology we have at hand that streamlines these processes. We'll then wrap up with some ideas on how you might start or continue, indeed, your journey to digital transformation. So let's get started. You often find the higher in a business you go, the simpler the goals get to describe. Growth, profitability, and risk aversion are usually high on most C-suite agendas. You could be looking to grow your business by opening up new markets for existing products. Maybe you're looking at other geographies to sell into or other standards to achieve certification against. Poor, disjointed, or manually heavy processes can be a barrier to this. Making more profitable products relies on looking at reducing the costs to design, develop, validate, regulate, and manufacture each product. When we're called into customers, margin erosion is usually very high on the agenda. And the key to stopping margin erosion is often increasing the efficiency of the processes by removing the redundancy from them. I'm guessing everyone on the call today has some fantastic processes, at least written down on paper, that chart the path towards regulatory submission and compliance. Often, though, we see it's down to a small group of heroes who spend a lot of time going from silo to silo, manually collecting and consolidating the data to ensure that the pack that goes out to the regulatory body is complete and matches the physical product being approved. So let's take a look at some of the market dynamics and what some of the experts and some of the bodies that you answer to are saying about how people should improve their business processes. So the regulatory side of the industry has got very focused on the integrity of data. There's been a huge focus over the past couple of years on EU MDR and IVDR. One of the early pieces of guidance from them was that having FDA 820 plus ISO 13485, for instance, did not equal EU MDR. The recommendation in the report was to look at using a digital thread supported by a PLM architecture to automate and streamline processes to support both existing standards and the new MDR. Some of you may have read the FDA case for quality, and this states that achieving product quality does not necessarily equal regulatory compliance. And we ended up with this mad situation where compliance levels were higher than they'd ever been, yet product quality had dropped significantly. So there's a reason for that. We'll look at that a bit later. We've also seen a rise in FDA warning letters, usually linked to data integrity and collection of statistics. $400,000 is the average cost to clear an FDA warning letter. Another recent stat said that 40% of med device manufacturers' time and money will be devoted to regulatory compliance in 2021. That's a huge number. That's a huge investment from companies like you. The overarching advice from these bodies is do what you can to put a solid compliance backbone in place and use the tech that's out there to automate and manage your processes and ingrain quality into every step, rather than it being a set of activities in isolation. It's what our industry calls digital transformation. So some of the key value drivers that are motivating change, well, where do we start? Let's just take a look. Traceability of parts, products and process data across your enterprise. This is core to digital transformation. We need to establish a digital product definition and then link all the relevant product data to this definition. This is the basis of what we call the digital thread. Once you have a product definition, you can then move from managing documents to managing data. With a strong digital foundation, you can now look at enterprise visibility and collaboration, opening up the information to other people. The FDA wants us to break down silos and bring cross-functional teams together, as they see this is essential to improving patient outcomes. Lastly, with traceability and enterprise visibility in place, your organisation can then take advantage of advanced dashboards with predictive analytics and prescriptive actions. We aren't going to focus there today. We're focusing on the foundations. But just understand that as your organisation matures from managing documents to what Adrian will demonstrate later as a part-centric approach, the analytics that you can draw from that can provide tremendous business value. So what you see on the screen here is our vision of the consolidated source of the truth. And across the bottom there, you'll see some business value benefits. And these come from various white papers from people like Aberdeen Group and UNS Research. And the top two challenges that I hear when I go into customers, when we get called in, the top two challenges are it takes an army of people a ton of time to assemble all the documentation from multiple systems and silos. And they also spend a ton of time in meetings to coordinate cross-functional activities. If you can find a way to harmonize all of this using this digital thread approach, you get end-to-end traceability and you get consolidated processes and systems. And what does that do? It frees up your engineers' time to create more innovative and safer products. Today, in your businesses, you've probably got a number of different business systems. You may have some PDM for managing your product data, or maybe even PLM already. You've probably got an ERP, MRP, MES system in manufacturing. You may have a QMS system in place, and then you've probably got CRM and CPQ to support sales and marketing. You've probably invested a lot in each of the individual tools, and each system probably does a great job for the departments that use them. But how do you get the data shared effectively between the different functions of the business? So here's an example. 3 teams are all looking at sets of disconnected information. We've got the engineering team. They're looking at doing some iterative design to develop a complex new product, and they're working with CAD artifacts to, and the customer requirements to build the digital product. Regulatory are then working off to the side then with paper-based documents ready to submit to the FDA, to the EU, or whoever else it is that we are working with. And the paperwork that they've got is often obsolete the minute they get hold of it. Then we've got quality working off a copy or a PDF description of the product they've got from engineering. Again, that information is probably out of date the second that it's printed off or turned into a PDF. So the result there of each area acting on its own is the company will eventually produce products which A, don't match the submission, B, will have quality paperwork, but not actionable quality intelligence, because the quality information is disconnected from the actual product versions, parts, and components. And C, we don't want to have quality that's designed into the product. Well, investing tremendous resources in the quality processes that are bolted on just to check a box. So we look at the best ways to link these systems together to give a single platform to take the data from these silos and make it available to the rest of the business. And this is what we call the digital thread. So PTC, the vendor that we work with, recently sponsored a survey of the life sciences industry, and a number of participants interacted with the analyst firm Excendia. And what we were looking to do was identify the top business disruptors in your place that impact your business. And you're probably not surprised to see regulatory right at the top of that list. So I'm going to hand over to Owen now, who's going to give you a bit of a deeper dive into that regulatory landscape and some of the impacts.
Thanks, Lee, and thanks to all that have joined us today. It's great to see such a diverse cross-section of companies attend. I hope we can provide you with some food for thought about how you would develop and streamline aspects of your product development process. I guess there are many areas where companies are trying to improve things, and while our presentation today is somewhat of a general one encompassing many aspects of the development process, I do hope you find something of interest for your area or your department. Lee has kindly positioned me as an expert in this area, and sometimes that can be a dangerous thing. However, what I do have is a lot of differing experiences over the past number of years in working with companies like yours, companies that are undertaking continuous improvement projects to try and positively influence things like efficiencies, mitigating risk, and ultimately, I guess, to be more productive and profitable. To help in our discussions with our clients, we talk about the value of having a framework for addressing regulatory compliance. I'm sure many of you will have a version of this slide on screen. Each company's needs will differ based on products they design and manufacture, and indeed what geographies they are keen to sell into. Also, how automated or streamlined a company will execute against these regulatory needs depends on company's maturity, their stage of development, be they a startup or a well-established business. So there are a number of factors that will influence this framework for each of you. That said, for any medical device company, there are minimum requirements to be met, and the ease with which we are able to meet those requirements has a direct bearing on the product development efficiency, the ability to mitigate risk, and, as we mentioned previously, has an impact on overall productivity at team level, department level, and ultimately for the business. So just to talk through this slide a little bit, top of the slide shows some typical regulatory requirements which are imposed by bodies like the EU and FDA, and they're imposed as conditions of sale. Feeding into that from the left-hand side shows some ISO and IEC process standards to help companies build devices to a standard blueprint and quality. And finally, there on the right-hand side are some typical product standards, which are fundamentally to ensure the safety of components being built. So, as I mentioned at the outset, this slide is intended as a framework. So as it stands here, it may not fully represent your individual company's needs. We use it to get a baseline on where companies are, what areas are working well for them, and where there might be gaps that are causing some risks or perhaps some inefficiencies. I guess most of the companies, indeed all of the companies we work with, have a quality management system in some form or another to help work through adhering to these standards. So QMSs take very different shapes and sizes, be they manually managed with printed out documented SOPs, etc., or be they automated with validated workflows in some kind of software applications. But what we typically see, and what some of the industry reports that Lee alluded to suggest, is that medical device companies tend to work in a siloed and quite a sequential manner. So what exactly does that mean? So if we black and white the product development process, it is a stage gate process, which it should be, but that also implies that until perhaps engineering have done their bit of the work, quality can't do theirs. And from a formal process point of view, that's correct and proper. It does. There is a lot of work done at the development stage that, if it were done in a controlled and connected way, it would make the job of quality more streamlined. And Adrian will show us some of that later in terms of how, for example, managing a design history file can be a byproduct of working in a connected system rather than being a job of work which is, forced on quality ahead of a pending audit. And just finally on this slide, so our job and the value we endeavour to bring to companies we work with is to use this framework to right-size the solutions that a company might need to enable the entire product development team work in a single connected environment, which is what we call weaving quality into the digital thread. So what exactly do we mean when we say companies work in siloed and sequential manner? Some of you might recognize some of the typical things we hear from our customers on this slide. If you're like most medical device makers, you'll have three key teams during the development process, and typically all looking at different sets of disconnected information in different systems. The engineering team is undertaking what's a complex and fluid iterative process to design and develop complex products. Typically they're working with CAD artifacts and documentation to fulfill product requirements. The regulatory team is working typically with electronic paper-based documents, if that makes sense, and then they're submitted to the FDA, EU, and other notifying bodies. However, because of the iterative design process that the paperwork that the regulatory folks deal with is often obsolete the minute the engineering team publish it or issue it. The quality team is typically working off a copy or a PDF of the description of the product that the engineering team are working on, and that's typically published at a certain point in time. So by default, that suggests that that's disconnected to the set of data that the engineering team are working on. The result is each area acting on its own a lot of the time, with the risk that the company eventually produces products which maybe don't entirely match what was submitted to the notified bodies. A lot of quality paperwork is generated, but not actionable quality intelligence, because the quality information is disconnected from the actual product versions, parts, and components. And also, companies invest enormous resources and time in compliance activity that doesn't move the needle on actual product quality. So some of that thinking is supported by the FDA's report, A Case for Quality, which sends the somewhat simplistic message, I guess, that good compliance doesn't necessarily equal good product quality. So in summary here, I guess there are areas of the product development process where companies are investing tremendous resource in quality-related activity, which don't provide the return in terms of quality of the product designed and produced. And the preferable approach is to use the quality activity to have greater influence on the products that we design and make, essentially weaving quality into the digital thread. One more pertinent point just before we move on from this slide is the recent introduction of EU MDR to the regulatory landscape and the expectations that is setting. So as I'm sure you will all know, it had been due in May 2020 and was delayed for a year with the impact of the pandemic. So from a regulatory point of view, it is now in force since May of this year. And that implies that medical device companies are now obliged to conduct their business under this regulation. We know that companies are at different levels of maturity and how they're managing that. The pandemic has been an obvious disruptor, not just for the adoption of EU MDR, but for businesses generally. So I think some companies are catching up on that a little bit, and others might be further down the line. I guess the fact that MDR is now a regulation as opposed to its predecessor, which was a directive, it's driving a lot of change and consolidation in this space. We've seen that notified bodies are now compelled to conduct their affairs in a more disciplined and exacting way, which is forcing consolidation in the number of notified bodies operating throughout Ireland and the UK, and indeed further afield. Historically, when audits were being done, it was acceptable perhaps to have some gaps noted and then action them with a follow-up. But this is now moving more towards having an always-on, audit-ready mentality. MDR is forcing the thinking that I should know at any given point in time, any week, any day, any hour, how the design has evolved to where it is. If it's a big job of work to get audit ready, that implies that there are gaps and possible risk, and hence the further need to get quality ingrained in the design process with engineering teams in a more collaborative way. The good news is that by connecting, the department's business systems and in turn your development processes, being always on audit ready becomes a reality. If engineering and quality work hand in hand, then the job of work to be audit ready becomes more a byproduct of the daily tasks that are undertaken. So the systems can easily report on them and automate, for example, design history file creation. Adrian will show us how training records can be streamlined and reported on with ease, provided people are all working within a connected system and a connected environment. So if you feel that your systems and processes are somewhat siloed or disconnected, there is some consolidation in knowing that you're not alone. The slide here references a 2018 Aberdeen report of medical device companies citing disconnected systems, processes, and siloed departments as the #1 reason they look at adopting PLM systems, in essence, to help develop a digital thread strategy. The report cited other reasons also, and as you can see here in the slide, some of those may be more pertinent to you at this point in time. And I guess the converse message of this report, if you like, is that not having a true collaborative PLM system at the center of your design process introduces inefficiency and possible risk. So in summary, before I hand over to Adrian, some typical questions that we get from companies we deal with, which I thought might preempt some of the questions you have. They also try to join the dots on how some of our industry terminology translates into actionable items for your business. So the first one there being, digital thread. Because IT systems and processes has evolved, significantly over the years, it's now eminently feasible to work with BOMs and CAD structures much earlier in the design process. You can have a CAD structure and a BOM visible to everybody, all stakeholders, from day one. And it is much easier to share and collaborate on these. And that indicates or suggests that a move from a typically document-centric approach to design control, moving away from that could yield some dividends. Model-based engineering, MBE. So, this is a formalized methodology that is used to support requirements, design, analysis, verification, and validation associated with the development of complex products and systems. And that's in contrast to the document-centric approach. MBE puts models and bills of materials at the center of the design system, which typically is more collaborative and easier to work with than a document-centric approach. The ability to define critical to quality characteristics early in the design life cycle, be able to document them as requirements, add them to a CAD model, stroke bill of materials, and store all of that under change control gives companies greater ability to tie requirements back to validation and ultimately product functions. Lee mentioned, that the OEM for Winchell PLM is PTC, based in Boston, and they feel so strongly about the value in this model-based engineering approach that they have taken out a patent to protect it. So for the IT and technical folks amongst us, that patent pending is supported by the development and innovation in REST interfaces between enterprise systems, which means that companies can build on what they already have in place. So integrate existing systems rather than the old approach of taking them out and putting in all new ones. Finally, from a bottom line impact, why should companies like yours do anything in this space? And I think it's simply back to Lee's slides about companies' priorities around growth, or the need to positively impact profitability and indeed mitigate risk. So Adrian's going to show us how some of these things now manifest themselves in the tools, and I'll hand you over to Adrian, and thank you all for your time for attending, and I hope you can take something useful from the session. So over to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Owen. So let's just start with a brief thought here. Now, what if holds a world of possibilities, but what if we could adopt practices that mean the non-value add admin tasks we often come to dread get embedded in our development cycle? Capturing the data we need upstream for audit and quality, instead of just dropping everything at some point later and trying to document what we've done or what we did. I'm probably getting it wrong. And not just capturing the data we need to support the change in quality activities as we execute them, but writing the causes, the impacts, the outcomes straight into the history of our design for ease of reference later in the process, or not just audit when we're reviewing next stage of our design development. And stepping on, in the medical device world, design control is king. It's a discipline required by the regulators. So just looking at the diagram from an FDA document on the screen here. If we stop and think about what we're looking at, we can see design control is the original digital thread that we're talking about today. It requires the ability to demonstrate traceability from the user need through product release with verification, validation at key steps throughout that process. So based on that, we view design control as simply another term for good product lifecycle management. Among all industries, the med device industry was the first to realise the benefits of maintaining this continuous web of traceability across the extended product lifecycle. So we work with med device companies such as yourselves to promote best-in-class design control with a digital thread extending from the initial requirements capture through the development process out into post-market surveillance if you choose to go that route, and back around the loop to support our life cycle management of our product as we develop over time. And across this entire process, everything connects back into the BOM, creating a living bill of information. And in this bill of information, we're making sure your quality and compliance records are in sync. We're making sure whoever is part of your team, whatever role they're performing in a business, they're sharing the same set of rich information that's guaranteed correct, guaranteed up to date. And if we go into this post-market surveillance, then we're capturing performance measurements, bring them back into this rich set of data that we can work to and incorporate into our full product definition. So if you start to think about PLM, it's got a whole raft of capabilities that are intended and developed to support a broad range of standards. We've got a limited time frame today to try and show you what the product is, what it can do. So we're just going to concentrate on a few of these topics today. So we're going to talk through some bits and pieces on the digital thread because it's the backbone of what we do. We're going to touch on how this can impact and support your audit processes. We're going to show you what the corrective action, preventive action tools look like in the system. We're going to then give you an introduction to document control capabilities that are written into Windchill and how that then extends into managing training on your standard operating procedures. So let's stop and actually look at some product. Let's start out the demo showing the first vision of our digital product definition. So because I'm managing my renal systems here in Windchill, I'm capturing the configurations that the business would ship or deliver for this product line. And each of these configurations has its own set of records. So this particular configuration with its attributes and definitions, each of them will have an independent structure with linked parts, etc. So we're looking at the first view of our bill of materials in Windchill. Because we're working with CAD, we're inheriting all the rich 3D data for our CAD viewables better into this. But also, if I expand the list here, we see that embedded in my bill of materials is all the documentation, supporting documentation, describing data, CAD files that are required for us to produce and deliver our product. So this is our bit of information. Also at this stage we start to see, we're getting feedback that change is taking place. So this leads us into thinking about quality. Now, as I said, you've got your change in there, but for you guys in the med device, one of the dominating things is the need to have a design history file, which often takes quite some time to build. But here in Windchill, it's an automated process by default. Although with the right role assigned to me in the system, I can actually request it's updated this history file on the fly. What it does is it goes to my BOM configuration, tree walks through the entire BOM, all this related data, and identifies which records, which parts, documentation, process records should be incorporated into my design history file. So then when we come around to needing to get data out for an audit or for some other purpose, it's as simple as requesting the system generates this as a file which I can then open up, distribute to suit the needs of whatever I'm doing at this point in time. So taking tedious tasks away from individuals in the business. The other capabilities we start to see here amongst all the other tabs here, where we get lots of rich data about our BOM configuration, is the history. As we're working in the system, developing the BOM over time, the system is recording the history of what happens, including any release or attempts to release it and the processes that impacted that. We also have changes, so anything that constitutes part of my change process gets written into the history of anything it affects, anything that results from change. So we're seeing problem reports, CAPA requests, change notices taking place here that have been executed or are executing against this BOM. Diving down, we're web-based, show me the details about this CAPA. So now I see my CAPA record inside Windchill. Because this is all workflow driven, we've got a plan you can review at any time that's kept up to date by the system as to how we're progressing with this. It's got all of the relative data embedded straight in here, so who's involved in it, what objects are affected by this CAPA. And again, here's a list of parts, files, documentation that might be impacted. Go and look at the part, and okay, this graphics card, I can see in the way used history, this is used across multiple products. So I just flipped on file to click there, but let's look at how someone else might work with that data. So just logged in as a member of my regulatory team. And I've got access as this role to various reports to study what's happening in the system. So what open CAPA reports have we got? And this is really showing you the rich capabilities in the system for getting data out. I've got a list of records at the bottom. We've got intelligent charts, which I can use to filter my report. I can update the contents of my report simply by pick and click, regenerate the report with a new field in the list, and then right down here I've now included my subject type field. Adding new graphic charts, just as simple. Choose which fields I want to include as my axes for my charts, and system shows me the example. I can change descriptive details for it, add this table into my report, and it still has the same rich interaction with the data we're doing. So if we just slim this down to where my risk is significant, and show me the CAPA that goes with this. So another routine to the same set of data straight from my report, and there's the details of my CAPA. The documentation we've mentioned a couple of times. So Windchill provides the right tools for the guys to use in the right environment based on where they're auditing. So if I want to go and work on an existing document, I haven't got to know where it's stored. I've got full search capabilities to go and locate a document based on known data, pick up the one I want, and just request the system fetches it for me. And when I complete this, so I'll check it out to make sure no one else modifies it while I'm doing this job of work. So when I've finished my job here, check it back in, it will go back to the right location. Now, making sure the data is where it should be, and I've got all the tools up there I need. Creating new documents, tell it which product the document has allegiance to. Have intelligent document types already written into the system based on ISO 13485 standards. that will follow the right process according to those standards. It knows what data it should capture relative to these, and if this is something that needs to be incorporated in DHF, it can be built right into there. Does it need training? And you see, I changed the type, it changes the attributes. I have templates as well, so we can manage your corporate templates to make sure all documentation has the correct corporate look and feel within the business. So let's create that document. So remember, this goes off to Windshield, finds my template, brings it back to me with all of the detail that's necessary, and I can have my intelligent attributes managed by the system embedded in my documentation, so it's always aligned with the records that people are fetching back. I put on one of those documents there with required training. So when we put in a document that's requiring training, such as SOP, it knows intelligently who needs to be trained on this SOP and starts distributing training tasks for this document around the business. And right here, I put a note in to say I've done my training, but we see the first vision of, we've got an FDA approved electronic sign-off process here built right into the system from day one. So I identify myself to the system and complete my task. The system records I've completed my training, and as the right user administering this, my quality team, I can go in again, same rich reporting techniques, go and see where we are regards training on particular documents across the board. And in the background, as these processes are running, managing my training, once everyone is trained up, it's automatically releasing the new versions of my SOPs. How does everyone else gain access to this data? Because not everyone wants a complex interface to get it. We have lightweight apps available on tablet, PC, Android phone, simple to use, given to the right people with the right notes to suit their role. They have the ability to search based on keywords or known data, and it brings back the right data to suit their role. So I've just looked for a drawing that says mount, gives me a hell of a lot of data come back here, but this is the one I really want. And a simple click gives me a PDF copy of that drawing, because in the background the system's generating these viewable images that are non-editable to distribute around the business for us. But it doesn't stop at just drawings. There's other data we may need. I mean, we can give you the ability to view and measure 3D models, 3D geometry, section them, etc. We can look at the properties of an individual part they're developing, or if I'm in purchasing, I may want a flat parts list. And again, same style interface. I put in a partial part number and get the system to go off and run a search for what's available for me right now. And it gives me 3 hits. And which one do I want to look at? Let's just go down and look at this. So what the system does, generates my current parts list for me. I get instant feedback on components as I select them, so I'm getting some good indication as to whether this is the part I should want. I can take that file away and work with it elsewhere with an export button should I need to. But more detail here, if I was in someone in production, I probably want an indented BOM. And now I get this intelligent 3D geometry over on the side, so I can start to select parts in the 3D image or select them from the BOM, and it will take me to the right parts. I don't even have to know the part number that I'm working with. And very powerful, very delivering a lot of capabilities that you wouldn't normally get from a BOM in a spreadsheet, for instance. Have the same logic for documentation, because I'm delivering SOPs, works instructions out to the business. You want to be delivering a PDF that they can just pick up and work with and know they're working with the latest version. So quality policy is there, and it says it's effective because everyone's trained up on it. That's not, we will just spend time looking at documents. But that's looking at documentation. We also have the same concept for process. So tasks being involved in change, or someone wants to look at my change notices that are running, my ECM metrics. And again, intelligent graphics, so I can say which ECNs have missed their deadline and they're still running. And here's the list here, And if I wanted more details about those, I can just drill down from the web page right here. It's lots of power, easy to access data. Okay, so in a very rapid run through of some of the capabilities in Windchill and PLM, the message we've brought to you is how getting rid of silos of information, getting everyone to go to one location to pick up the information they need, can make your process far more efficient. Getting all of our data tied back to the part number, becoming part-centric, gets everyone in the business talking to the same set of information. We capture the quality right against the data as we're managing it, as we're creating it. We manage how change occurs, how change is recorded and executed in that same environment. Our documentation gets developed, authored, driven according to standards that are defined by your regulatory bodies. And once we've got all this data there, stored, controlled, we distribute it around the business in the simplest, most efficient way we can. Simple, easy to use apps. And I'll now pass you back over to Lee. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adrian. So, life science leaders are more likely to rely on PLM solutions for design control, design history files, device master records, standard operating procedures, and the management of them. That's according to a 2018 study by analyst firm Aberdeen, which was sponsored by the vendor that we work for, PTC. The study showed that leaders were significantly more likely to rely on PLM for the digital thread that automates design control and manages these documents. So the leaders who rely on PLM realised a 22% improvement in engineering productivity and a 17% reduction in cost of goods sold over the past 2 years. So Concurrent and PTC are uniquely positioned to help you capitalise on this opportunity. We are the first choice of 23 of the top 30 global medical device makers for PLM. And there's a reason for that. And that's because PTC have invested over $700 million in technology and acquisitions to make this absolute best-in-class med device data management. And from this slide, you can see a lot of household names rely on us as their design, product development, quality, compliance backbone. Just wanted to talk about Boston Scientific very briefly. So they selected Windchill because they had this design anywhere, build anywhere vision. And they're using Windchill to transform R&D and quality at 23 global sites to create a unified engine of innovation. Over 20,000 users have now been enabled on Windchill, and the company is on track to meet its goal of 50% reduction in total cost of ownership over the next 10 years, including a 40% improvement in R&D efficiency. And they value that at $27 million a year in savings. So just to summarize, we've talked a lot today about the importance of weaving quality into the digital thread. According to analysts, that is the most sought after capability when looking to mature PLM systems that are already in place, introducing the voice of quality into the process. And as you can see on the screen here, some of the benefits are amazing. Up to 50% acceleration in time to market, up to 50% reduction in scale-up time, 65 fewer engineering change orders, 50% increase in overall equipment effectiveness, 90% improvement in first right time quality, 40% reduction in the cost of poor quality. So 95% lower non-conformance resolution times. These are huge numbers, but they are achievable. And we see this day in, day out with the customers that we work with. So where are you on your journey? Wherever you are, we can work with you. We can help you. We can help you build a roadmap and a plan to get your systems automated, unified, and get everybody collaborating. And we'll be reaching out to you after this webinar to see if we can start a discussion in how we might work with your business to help you on your journey to digital transformation. So you'll receive some backup information from us following the webinar. And from there, we will then be able to, hopefully start some discussions with you around some next steps. So thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.